Hi everyone, it's Lisa Mears. Thank you for joining me. In today's video, I'm going to be making 3 cards using some layering stencils from Pretty Pink Posh. And I'm really loving these layering stencils because you can make a fun design for your card front without having to do much of anything else. These layering stencils make for such easy to make cards with just using the stencils and some colorful inks. So this layering stencil is called Layered Dinosaurs, and I'm taking a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock. I cut it down to 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches so that it's slightly wider and taller than my stencil because the stencil is 6 by 6 in size. I went ahead and added the stencil with some magnets onto my Make Art station. And I'm using the Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink to color up the spikes on the dinosaur. And then I move into the black Soot Distress Oxide ink to color in the eyes and the mouths on all of those dinosaurs. And this stencil is Stencil A in the set of 3 stencils. They are lettered on the bottom right hand corner, A, B, and C. So I'm using the first stencil, which is A. Next, I move into the Mowed Lawn ink and I color up some of the leaves on this stencil. And there are several groups of 3 dots on this stencil, which I'm inking up with my Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. This is the brown ink. I'm coming back in with the Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink, and I'm coloring in the stems of the leaves. Okay, so that completes Stencil A. I'm going to remove that stencil, and then I'm going to line up Stencil B. And once I have that lined up, I will add magnets to it to hold it in place. And there's a few more leaves on this stencil, which I'm coloring up with some Twisted Citron Distress Oxide ink. I'm using a variety of greens just to have some different contrasting colors. So that first stencil I had the Mowed Lawn, which is a darker green, and this one is a lighter green. I'm coming in with a detailed blending brush just to add a little bit more of the Mowed Lawn ink to the bottom of the sets of leaves just to add some more contrast. And I'll do that for all of the leaves on this stencil. Next, I'll add some Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink to the arms and legs on one of the dinosaurs, as well as adding some of the spots on a few of the other dinosaurs. Next, I'm going to start coloring up all of the dinosaur bodies, and this particular dinosaur is going to have the squeezed lemonade. I also have some of the shaded lilac. I'm going to switch over to stencil layer C. And then I'm going to finish up all of the coloring for the rest of these dinosaurs. So I'm coming in with the Wilted Violet, which is the purple. I'm also going to bring in some Scattered Straw, which is a darker yellow. This particular one is Carved Pumpkin. And I'm also going to add some Peacock Feathers, followed by some more of the Squeezed Lemonade. And this is my completed stencil. So you can see all of the details with those 3 layer stencils. I think that is such a fun background. So the next stencil that I'm going to be using is the Layered Construction Trucks 3-layer stencil. So you can see here what it looks like. I go ahead and cut my paper down to 6.5 by 6.5 inches, and I'm using my Stencil A with my Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink. This is going to color in the inside of the tires, also some of the lines on the trucks, as well as some of the accent marks on the cones. And then I put my next stencil over top of that. That is Stencil B, and I'm coloring in the outside part of the tires with the black Soot Distress Oxide ink. Next, I'm inking up the sand with the Vintage Photo. And there's lots of sand on this stencil. There's some sand in the dump truck, and there's other patches of sand throughout the stencil. Next, I'm going to move on to the Carved Pumpkin ink for the cones and the Tumbled Glass ink for the windows on the construction trucks. So Stencil B is complete, and now I'm going to be moving on to the last stencil, which is Stencil C. So I'm just going to line that up, add my magnets, and I'm going to go ahead and color some of the construction trucks up in the Squeezed Lemonade, which is the yellow ink. I'm then going to come in with the Candied Apple Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to color some of the trucks with that one. Followed by Mowed Lawn, so some of those trucks are going to be green. And then I'm going to come back in with the Carved Pumpkin and finish up the cones. And so I decided to make some of the windows a little bit darker, so I lined back up Stencil B, and I'm coming back in with the Tumbled glass just to make those windows a little bit darker. Here is what the completed stencil looks like when you add all of those colored inks. Such a fun background. My next 3-layered stencil is the Layered Cars stencil. And this stencil has some cars, some traffic lights, some trucks, and some school buses. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my Squeezed Lemonade ink, and I'm coloring up the yellow traffic lights. Next, I'm coming in with the black soot, and I'm coloring up all of the wheels, the bumpers, the lights, the door handles, with the Distress Oxide Black Soot ink. Next, I'm adding Stencil B, and on this stencil, I'm going to color in all of the windows and some of the wheels. But I'm first starting out with the Mowed Lawn ink, and I'm adding the green traffic light, and then I'll come in with the Candied Apple ink and color in the red traffic lights, followed by the Hickory Smoke ink, and I'm coloring in all of the wheels and the windows on all of those vehicles. Once I finish that, I'm going to come in with my stencil layer C, and I'm going to ink up all of the vehicles. So I'm going to ink up the Squeezed Lemonade for the school buses. There are 2 school buses that I'm inking up, and then I'm going to come in with the Prized Ribbon Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to color up the trucks. And then I'm going to come in with the Candied Apple ink, and I'm going to color in the cars, followed by the Mowed Lawn ink, which is my green ink, and I'm finishing up the last 3 cars. Next, I'm coming in with the Scattered Straw, which is a darker yellow, and just adding some darker yellow around the edges and corners of the school buses just to add more shading. And then I'm coming in with the Hickory Smoke ink, and I'm coloring in the traffic lights. And I forgot to color in the end of this school bus, so I'm doing so now. And now I'm coming back in with Stencil B, and I'm just darkening up those windows. So I'm just bringing in my Hickory Smoke ink and making those windows a little bit darker. And here is another fun background using the Layered Cards stencil. I just love all of those colors. So I'm going to be using the Dinosaur Editions stamp set and the word Roar. And I'm going to stamp out the word roar in random spots all over this card panel. I did cut my card panel down to 5 3/8 by 5 3/8. I am going to be making a square card. I wanted to keep the front of this card very simple, and I did not want to take away from that cute dinosaur pattern on the front of this card. So I'm not going to be adding any other sentiments to the front of the card, but in a few moments you'll see me add something to the inside of the card. Meanwhile, I'm going ahead and adding some of the Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink around the edges just to add a little bit more definition to this card front. For my card base, I have a piece of craft cardstock that measures 5.5 by 5.5 inches, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment on the inside. This sentiment says, "Stomping by to say hello." I'll go ahead and add the card front to my card base, and then on the inside of my card I'm going to add a dinosaur stamp from the Dinosaur Friends stamp set. So I go ahead and stamp that out onto some Bristol smooth cardstock, and I'm just going to color it up with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I'm coloring it up with turquoise green. I'm also going to use the blender to blend that color out, and then I'm going to use the bright yellow for the lines on the dinosaur, as well as the gray for the feet. I'm going to go ahead and add the dinosaur on the inside of my card, and that's going to complete this card. For my layered cards panel, I want this to be an A2 size card, so I'm taking a rectangle shaped layering die, and I'm die cutting out the part of that panel that I want to use on my card front. And I'm using the word beep from the Across the Miles stamp set, and I'm stamping it out in various places on my card. I also stamped out the word vroom going in the opposite direction, and that's going to complete the sentiments for the front of the card. Once again, I did not want to take away from any of that cute, fun background on the card panel by adding a sentiment over top. But I am going to add an additional sentiment to the inside, so I did die cut a circle die, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp out the sentiment, sending smiles across the miles. And then I'm going to add that circle to the inside of my card. My card base is a blue card base that measures A2 in size, so it's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'm also going to use some of the cars from the Across the Miles stamp set. I'm going to add these cars to the inside of my car, so I went ahead and stamped out one of the cars here, and I'm coloring it up with my Carmine red Zig Clean Color Rail Brush marker. And I'm also going to be using the blender to blend that color out to add some more shading to this car. If you don't have a blender, you can always use a water brush or a paintbrush with some water on the end, and that will serve the same purpose as the blender marker, only without using water. The blender marker does have a blending solution inside, and there's no need to use water with this particular marker. I used the gray marker for the wheels, and for the windows I used the light blue. I added yellow for the headlight, and I also used gray for the bumpers on the car. I went ahead and colored out 3 additional cars. So the green car is the emerald green marker as well as the blender. The blue car is the blue marker with the blender, and the yellow car is the bright yellow and yellow marker with the blender. So I'm just lining up these cars on the inside of my card, and that's going to complete this card. The construction truck's background is also going to be an A2 size card, so I'm taking a rectangular layering die and I'm positioning it over top of the part of the background that I want to use on my card. Go ahead and die cut that out. I'm adding a sentiment to the front of my card front, so I'm using the scalloped square die from the Crafty Days die set to die cut a red square, and I'm taking the solid square layering die and I'm going to add it to the scalloped square to die cut the center out. I'm going to also take the solid square die and die cut a piece of vellum. The vellum is actually going to go inside of my scallop square, and this is where I'm going to add my sentiment stamp that says "Miss You Tons." The sentiment is from the Construction Trucks stamp set. So now I'm just going to go ahead and add my scalloped square as well as the vellum piece right inside of the scalloped square. So just like with my previous cards, I did not want to cover up any of that colorful stenciled background on the card front, so that's why I chose to use vellum in this case. So here I'm actually just taking that piece of vellum and I'm adding it to a piece of double-sided adhesive tape, and I'm going to remove that backing and add it to the card front. I did not want to add glue because many times the glue will show up through the vellum, and adding a piece of solid double-sided adhesive will make it so that the vellum just appears without any adhesive underneath it. I'm going to add this layer to an A2 size red card base. So my card base measures 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I thought that the red color in the card base would pull out more of that red in that scalloped rectangle. And I'm also going to add 2 shovels to the front of this card, and the shovels are from the Construction Trucks stamp set. I colored them with my gray Zig Clean Color Real Brush marker as well as the blender to blend that gray onto the inside. And also for the handle on the shovel, I used green as well as bright yellow. I'm going to go ahead and glue these shovels down to the front of this card, and that will complete this card. So once again, I created 3 easy cards using just some stencils and a few stamps from the Pretty Pink Posh June 2022 release. All product links will be down in the description box below. If you're interested in any of these products, please take a look down there. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.